again, thank you for joining us on our Banter with the Boys podcast. We're happy to have Eddie Murray, Super Bowl champion with the '93 Cowboys, joining us today. So welcome, Eddie, and appreciate you joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Now, yourself, when you were growing up in British Columbia, I was noticing that I was doing a little bit of reading, and you didn't have the opportunity to really play high school football. You played other sports, right? You were playing rugby and cricket and different things. Can you talk about your interest in football and how you had to kind of find a football league or a camp or different things to kind of get involved in because you didn't have the opportunity to play in a league, I guess, in high school?
Well, no, that's not necessarily true. So I was born in Halifax, Nova Scotia.
Okay.
My father was a career naval officer in the Canadian Navy. So Halifax is the East Coast Naval Base of the Canadian Navy, and Victoria, British Columbia is the West Coast Naval Base. So my brother and sister were born there, and my father was stationed there. And in the latter part of his career, before he retired, he was in Halifax. I was born there. He retired and moved the family to England. So in 1960, I moved to Portsmouth, England, which is the English naval base for the British Navy, and that's where D-Day started from and all of that stuff. So he was a diehard naval person. And so I lived in England for 10 years. And my father passed away when I was 14. And my mother wanted to be close to some of her relatives during her time of grief, and moved myself back to Victoria, British Columbia. I'm like 8 years younger than my brother and sister, kind of like the mistake of the family kind of thing. I came along unexpectedly. So my brother was teaching in London, and my sister was married to a German and living in Baden-Baden, Germany. So I moved with my mother back to Victoria. So my adolescent years, my 5 to 15 years, I played soccer, rugby, cricket. So that was the sports that I played. And when I moved to Victoria, Victoria is very English based with traditions and stuff. And so they had soccer and rugby, and there were cricket and stuff. So when I went to school, I naturally tried out for those teams. So my first year in school was in junior high. And when I went to high school, some of the kids were playing on football teams. So we didn't have football like you have in some of the bigger school systems, because they didn't have the money for it. So they had football leagues, but they were outside leagues. Like we had a construction company sponsor our team, and we had several different levels of teams and stuff, and we would raise money, like bingo kind of things, and raise money to support the league. So there was a league that I played in during my high school years. So when I graduated high school, I started working. So I wasn't from a family of wealth, and I really wasn't a very good student, just didn't apply myself. I went to school for sports. I loved playing sports, and that's what I wanted to do. So when I graduated, I started working in a lumberyard, driving a forklift, making construction orders up and helping people with any projects they had, weekend projects. And I just started working at a lumberyard. And from that, the head coach of the football team that I played for, and at that time, I'd only played like 2 years, 3 years of football. And he had taken a coaching position for a higher level football league that they had, that you could play up till 25, the beer league kind of a league. And he said, "Hey, Ed, you had an opportunity, there's a development camp that the BC Lions are running on the island, and they're going to pick some kids from here to go to a camp in Vancouver." And that's kind of ended up what gave me the opportunity. I got chosen to go to the camp. I went to the camp in in Vancouver. And from that was where I got seen by film from a coach at Tulane University.
During that camp, you also you crossed paths with Cal Murphy, right? The CFL legend.
He was the head coach at the BC Lions at that time. That is correct. Yes.
How were your interactions with Cal? And I mean, how much do you remember of that football camp?
Well, well, the camp itself, it was, again, times were different back then. I mean, I'm talking, it's 1975, 76.
Mhm.
And they had a junior rule at the time, is what they called it. I remember that was how it was conveyed to me at the time. And after the camp, the scenario from it was kind of weird. So it was a full contact week-long camp, 2-a-day practices. I wasn't much into 2-a-day practices. I went to 1-a-days. I went to the afternoon practice, to be perfectly honest. I didn't go to a lot of the morning practices. I went to kind of like just get away, catch up with friends that I went to high school with that were going to, you know, like Simon Fraser University or University of British Columbia, some of the schools that were over there, and just kind of catch up with them. And the other sidebar thing of it, my mother was in the thralls of cancer and shortly passed away shortly after the camp. And, you know, I just kind of wanted to get away, you know, dealing with everything that was kind of going on in my life at that time. So long story short, at the end of the camp, they had a scrimmage. You know, there was, I don't know, maybe, you know, maybe 70, 75 kids at this camp. Was, you know, like a big, huge camp. But I mean, and the premise of these development camps that the Lions used to have was they were trying to give opportunities for kids to get scholarships to go to colleges. So there was coaches like from Simon Fraser and University of British Columbia and like Portland State over in Washington, and you know, some of these schools that were kind of in that area around there of people that Coach Murphy knew to come and take a look. So at the scrimmage, they, you know, at halftime, you know, we didn't go to locker rooms, we just went to the sideline. You know, we were just standing around, and Coach Murphy comes up to me and he says, "Hey, are you the kid from Victoria that I heard that can kick?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "You know, do you mind kicking for me? I hadn't seen you kick all week. And do you mind, you know, if we get a snapper and a holder, and you mind if we, you know, I'll watch you kick." And so we did. We got a snapper and we got a holder. And like you said, I really didn't kick much that week, and I really wasn't that involved with the camp that much. And so, you know, we started kicking extra points and moving back. And as we were moving back, you know, the rest of the camp was kind of like horseshoeing around me and yelling and screaming and kind of giving me the business. And I kicked all the way back to like 52 yards before I missed. I did really well. And so he said, "Okay, all right, let's get back to the scrimmage." We do scrimmage ends. So I'm just showering, I'm going to go back to my life. I'm going to get on the bus and catch the ferry over to the island and just go see my mom. And she was in the hospital at that time. And just that's what I had in my head, you know. And one of Coach Murphy's assistants came up to me and says, Coach Murphy wants to talk to you. So I went to his office and he said, hey, Ed, you know, that was pretty impressive what you did. You know, you didn't know I was going to do this and hadn't really seen you that much. And, you know, that was quite impressive what you did, especially with everybody yelling and screaming. He said, "I'd like to invite you to come to training camp this year." So I said, "Well, what does that entail?" You know, and he goes, "Well, we want to keep because again, this junior rule thing, right?" He says, "We're going to bring you under the junior rule to camp. And what that means is you will be there. You will not be paid. You know, we will, of course, house you and feed you and all that kind of stuff. And you will go through camp. If you're fortunate enough to make it to the end and you end up making the team, you'll have to sign a contract prior to that. And then that contract will get executed. So you will then be able to be paid as a member of the BC Lions." So that was the premise that all happened at that time, you know. So, God, all of a sudden I forgot his name. Bob Ackles, I think it was Bob Ackles, was the general manager at the time. And he said, hey, Bob's going to give you a call. We're going to make a, have you sign a contract, which I did. And if I had made the team, I would have gotten $500 for a signing bonus, and I would have made $11,000 that first year. So I'm getting ready for camp. I'm working. My daily life basically was get up. We didn't have a car. My mother could never learn to drive. And so I'd catch the bus. I would go to work, jump on the bus again, go see my mom at hospital, catch the bus, go home, grab something to eat and go to bed. And that was my life, and working out, kicking, doing that kind of stuff. Nothing more really kind of than that. And I started getting a call from a guy named Willard Wells from Tulane University. So it's 1976. There's no Google. It's not like I could Google Tulane University. I'd never heard of Tulane, never heard of this guy before. And all he said was, Ed, my name's Willard Wells. I'm from Tulane University. Please give me a call back. I would like to see if you're interested in coming in on a recruiting trip. That was it. Well, I didn't like school. I've got to preface that. I was not really interested at all. So I just kind of ignored the messages. He ended up catching me on a Saturday that I wasn't working, explained who he was, what he wanted to do. Are you interested in coming in on a recruiting trip? And I said, no, I'm not. I'm going to be trying out for the BC Lions, and my mom and all this guy kind of getting that with the whole thing. I said, no, I'm really not interested. And he said, well, if things change, take my number down and give me a call. So now I'm getting ready to go to camp. I go to camp. I always remember it was Louis Pasaglia's rookie year. And the first round pick of the BC Lions at that time was a guy named John Shera. I think that's what his name was, John Shera. He was the quarterback from UCLA. And he was like the big signee for them. And so that was the time frame of everything. So Louis and I were rookies together, and we're in Penticton, British Columbia, which was where the camp was. And I'm trying out for the BC Lions. I'm 18 years old. I've played basically 2 years of scrub football in Victoria, and here I am. I'm in this situation. Well, it was just overwhelming, the whole thing, because at that time wasn't too many just specialist guys. You had to, like, Louis was a phenomenal kicker punter, but he was also an excellent wide receiver. In his early years, he was a slot back wideout for them and did a very capable job. I just wasn't ready. My head wasn't there. My body wasn't there. It was just overwhelming for me. And about a week into camp, I'm going out to practice, and this guy comes up to me and he says, hi, I'm Willard Wells from Tulane University. And I'm going, what the hell are you doing here? And he goes, hey, I just wanted to come and see you, see how things are going. Let's talk after practice. Kind of just a real quickie intro before practice. And during practice, I just, I realized I just shouldn't be there. And I actually, during practice, I went over to Coach Murphy and I said, Coach, I need to go home. I'm not ready for this. I'm my mom and everything, and I'm too young and all this kind of stuff. I said, and he goes, I agree. He said, I just thought I'd give you an opportunity, but I highly suggest you go over and talk to Coach Wells. So I do. I go over and talk to him. He talked about recruiting trip, and now I still have no idea where Tulane University is. I have no idea, nothing. Even when he told me it's in New Orleans, Louisiana, I had no idea where Louisiana was, nothing, right? It's 3,000 miles away from Victoria. Definitely not on my radar at that time. So I said, look, the only thing I want to do, I want to go home. I need to see my mom, check in on her, and I'll go. So how does Willard Wells and Cal Murphy, everything intertwined? So before Cal became the coach of the BC Lions, he was the head coach, I believe, was at San Jose State. prior to that. One of his assistant coaches was Willard Wells at San Jose State. Like most colleges, when you leave, there's always like a few assistants that the new coach will keep. Well, Willard Wells' expertise was recruiting. He was a phenomenal recruiter. And so they kept him on the new staff for a few years. And like most staffs, they'll end up bringing their own people in, and that person will end up getting let go. So Willard was let go at San Jose State, and Larry Smith had just signed as the new head coach at Tulane University and signed Willard Wells as one of his assistant coaches to coach the defensive line at Tulane. So he was getting ready to go to spring football. He had to, of course, pack up from San Jose, but of all things, Willard Wells was from Powell River, British Columbia. I think even today, there isn't a traffic light in the town, one of those towns, okay? It is a blip on the map. It's an Indian reservation and a logging town is what it is. You can only drive into it or you take a seaplane. That's one of those kind of towns, right? It's up in the interior, up in the Rockies of British Columbia. So he wanted to go see his family before he had to go and move to New Orleans, get ready for spring football. Flew into Vancouver, was driving up, planning on driving to go see his family. And he thought, I'm going to stop by and see my old head coach, Cal Murphy. I'm going to go by the offices of the BC Lions and say hi. So he does. He goes into Coach Murphy's office. And this is where the fork in the road happens for myself. Cal was looking at film of the camp, the development camp that I was at, and he had the film. He was filming me at halftime kicking. I didn't know this, but they were filming it. So he had film of this, and he goes, "Who is that?" And he goes, "Well, it's a kid out of Victoria. He's a junior, rural kid." And he means, "You mean that kid has eligibility?" And he goes, "Yeah, he hasn't attended school. He's been working. He hasn't gone out, and he's 18. He's going to be 19 shortly." And he goes, "Oh my God, Larry Smith gave me the duties to take care of the kickers at Tulane University, and we don't have a good kicker. We have a senior who's not very good, and we got a couple of freshmen coming in that are more positional players, but they can kick." Said, "That guy's unbelievable." He said, "I need his number." And that's how I started getting the calls. But for me, that was the biggest break, because I always get the question, Matt, all right, you're from Victoria, British Columbia. How did you get to Tulane University, especially in 1976? And that's the shortest way I can explain it, but it was the biggest break of my life that he happened to go into his office at that time, and he was watching film of me at this camp.
That's a wonderful story. I appreciate it.
It's crazy. I mean, it's it's the most fortunate thing that ever happened to me. I'd still be driving that forklift back in Victoria right now if that was the case.
How did you find your transition from British Columbia to Tulane? Like you said, you didn't really know much about Louisiana. You weren't familiar with the area. How was your transition?
Well, there was a lot of transition I was going through at that time. I know I prefaced it a little bit. So my mother ended up passing away about a month before I had to go to Tulane. She passed away mid-June of 76, and camp started in August in Louisiana. So I'm going through the transition of, losing my mother, both parents deceased, moving to a new country is what I'm doing, but also that was a huge diversity side of things, having to move to Louisiana. The heat and humidity was everything, the culture, the food, the language, having to deal with, the French. I mean, I don't speak French, even though I'm Canadian. I never took a French lesson in my life because of being in England most of my time. But anyway, just, the Cajuns down there, the lifestyle, I mean, it was a lot for me. So the thing that helped me was, and it was smart on Tulane's part, because they actually recruited another guy, a guy named Derry Donaldson. He was an Olympic level sprinter, had never played football. He was a track star in Victoria, British Columbia. He went to Mount Doug High School, and I went to Spectrum High School there. And he was also a lacrosse player. So with running into Coach Murphy and all that kind of stuff, he also found Derry Donaldson. And so he offered both of us scholarship. And so Derry had never, ever played a actual physical down of football in his life, but Tulane gave him a full ride because he was, I mean, back then, especially in Canada, when we did these, drills and stuff, and they would do, our 40 times, right? So we would run our 40 times in our equipment in Canada. And in the US, you would run them in shorts and stuff. So Derry Donaldson was running 4.4s with equipment on. Yeah, I know. So he was running like in those high 4.2s, low 4.3s with without equipment on. I mean, that's how explosive he was. He was an impressive athlete. And unfortunately, so to go to what ended up happening. So here's two Canadians, greenhorns, from the snow country kind of, all this kind of stuff. And we're going to Louisiana. They ended up billeting us with a family there. It was Einar and Jean Peterson. Einar was, he was the director of the student union, kind of like where the video games and the pool tables and the library, the bookstore and the swimming pool. It was like the activity center for the students. He was the director of it, and went to Tulane, longtime Tulanean from New Orleans, everything, and just bled Tulane. And he lived right beside the campus. And so we went down a week before camp started, and they had us stay with them. And they ended up being my family. They, for lack of better words, they just adopted me. I still see the kids now. Unfortunately, both Einar and Jean have passed, but they had 6 kids. They call me brother. I'm that kind of a close relationship. And that really helped me at that time, because I was definitely lost. I was definitely, grieving, of course, with my mother passing and everything. But I always remember, because one of my very close mentors in Victoria was my soccer coach, Joe Beckers, who is still alive. And he was very instrumental in helping me through my high school years, just to be able to keep myself eligible to play sports in high school. And when this opportunity came, I remember he sat me down and he says, look, I know you're a shitty student. He said, but you're not a dumb person. You're just lazy. Okay. You need to take advantage of every opportunity that school will give you to get your degree. Take advantage of tutors. You just need to learn how to learn. And there are techniques to do all those things, but you're just too lazy to pay attention or to learn them. And I took his advice, and they did. They had a lot of opportunities for us to take advantage of tutors and to learn and study tables and all of these things. And I tell you what, the proudest day of my life, in 4 years, I got my degree at Tulane University. So, I got an education and a history degree, but I learned how to study, and I applied myself, and I ended up getting a degree.
Now I'm going to kind of fast forward a little bit to draft day, and basically getting chosen by the Detroit Lions. And I realize the draft is shorter now than it was years ago. It was a lot more. There's a lot more rounds, and just kind of how everything is set up.
Well, plus it's televised now. Back then it wasn't.
Yep.
It wasn't even on radio back then.
What, yourself on when basically the NFL draft was rolling around that year, were you anticipating getting chosen? And what was your
No.
not at all? You
No,
thought you'd have to
not
like get a
at
tryout?
all.
Like I was gonna say, what
Well,
was your mood like? Were hoping you were keeping your fingers crossed the phone was gonna ring, or kind of what was your mindset at that point, going back to 1980?
well, that the indicators that you could use to see if you were going to be drafted was, did you get invited to any of the All-Star games? You know, Senior Bowl, East-West Shrine Bowl. They used to have an All-Star game, the Hula Bowl for seniors in Hawaii. So they had 3 All-Star games. They had a combine. They still had a combine like they still do now. So if you got invited to the combine, you played in one or multiple All-Star games, then you were kind of in that draftable status. Well, I didn't get anything, nothing. Didn't get invited to any All-Star game, didn't get invited to the combine. Did get worked out by teams, coaches. At that time, they used to have it was called the Bledsoe Scout. They had a system where some teams it was a way of saving money, but it was also a way of employing coaches to scout for teams. So you would be a Bledsoe scout, and I may have 5 teams that I report to. So the teams would give me positions or players who to go scout, and I would go see them. So you would have Bledsoe scouts that would work you out, and then I had a couple of individual coaches from teams and or scouts from teams come to work me out. So that was the only indication that I got from anything. So I was worked out, but I didn't do any of the other things. So I remember talking to my sports information director and kind of getting a feel from him. And he goes, Ed, all indications are, there was myself, our quarterback at that time was a guy named Rock Hontus. And we had a wide receiver named Alton Alexis. He said, Ed, I'm getting all indications that you are the 3 guys that have the opportunity to be drafted. So just do me a favor, stick close to your phone, and if a team reaches out, they'll contact me first, or they'll have your information. Is your number correct? I just want to verify it as the draft's coming up. I'm being asked to make sure there's no changes in how to contact me, which there wasn't. And so when the draft started, I just, I was at that time, we were in kind of in finals mode. We were getting ready for finals coming up, and wasn't too much left of school, graduation and all that kind of stuff. So it was in May and the draft was in April. And so, I'm just taking advantage of being home, studying, just kind of getting ready. Phone would ring kind of every now and again. And that was the process at that time. Like I said, it wasn't on radio. We didn't have the NFL network. We didn't have any of that kind of stuff. There was 2 days of the draft, 12 rounds, first 6 rounds, first day, last 6 rounds, second day. And so that was the setup at that time.
It was pre-Mel Kiper too.
Yes, it was. Yes, absolutely it was. Yep.
Basically, your rookie season with the Lions, I mean, you came in and you really set the world on fire. I mean, you set a team record with the amount of points that you had scored and so forth. Looking back at your first year, how was your transition from, like, obviously, again, like you went British Columbia, Tulane to Detroit Lions. How did you get acclimated in the Detroit area and with the team and everything? And obviously, you did well, kicking. How did all that kind of come together for you?
Well, again, a lot of it had to do with, that they were in a rebuilding mode themselves. They had a new staff. Monty Clark was about to begin his second year as the head coach. His first year, they were the worst team in the league. I think they were 2-14, and that's why they ended up having the first round pick. And that's why they took Billy Sims as the first round pick in my year. So they were rebuilding, and I was in a kind of like a perfect storm. Every position was up for grabs, And so Benny Ricardo was the incumbent kicker at that time. I think Benny had played there maybe 2 years or so, I believe. He was a Lion. And the other scenario that helped me was Benny was renegotiating for a new contract. So back then we would have rookie camp first. We would have a camp for like a week, 2 days for a week, only rookies, and then the veterans would come in, and then things got interesting. That now it's really competitive. You're competing for a position and all of that stuff. So Benny came in, and so I had a week all myself. It was like I got a way to kind of get all the jitters and nerves and all of that kind of stuff without kind of everybody all there. I met everybody at mini camp. Like after the draft, they brought us in for, a weekend camp to meet everybody and physicals and all that kind of stuff. So I was fine with the scenario that I was under. I knew I was competing against Benny. There was no other kickers in camp. It was just he and I. So I knew what the opportunity was for me. It wasn't like I had like 2 or 3 other guys I was competing against. So what ended up happening that ended up working out for me was I think we had, again, camp so long back then. I mean, we were in 2 days for like a month before like preseason started. But what ended up happening was right before preseason started, Benny decided to leave camp because of his contract. He said, "Hey, I'm not going to play in preseason. If I don't have a contract, I'm not going to play." Even though he was still, I think they had he was under an option year, which meant he was only going to get 10% of whatever he was being paid the year before. So, yeah, I mean, he left, and now I'm it. I'm all that they have, right? So what ended up happening, we ended up scoring like crazy in preseason. I mean, I think I had 2 games. I had 5 field goals. I know the Cincinnati game I did. I went 5 for 5 in the Cincinnati game. Had a couple of long kicks. I think I was, God, I want to say I was 12 of 15 in preseason. So they were like, "All right, Ben, if you want to sit out, let's go sit out." Because Ed kind of said, "Look, whether you're here or not, Ed's going to be the guy." So it really worked out for me. Of course, Billy given more opportunities. The offense got better really quickly with Billy and some other acquisitions and stuff. I'm sorry, my dog is trying to
That's
get
okay.
my attention. So,
Benny butting heads with Russ Thomas, the GM at the time, would have
yes.
really worked to your benefit, because I remember even growing up, some of the ugly holdouts with the Lions were,
Yeah.
excuse me, Russ Thomas, and basically a player agent and some of the different things that went on. So that really opened up a door for you. That's great.
No, I really did. I mean, and consequently, I had my butt-ins with Russ, when my contracts were up and that too. He was definitely a hardball, old-time general manager at that time, and the era of it back then was different. They don't have the collective bargaining salary cap system that they have now. Back then, it was all freelance, and they were a notorious team. Like Cincinnati was notorious for not paying their players. Even the Pittsburgh Steelers, as well as they were back in the 70s, they were notorious for not being highly paid players. And the Lions were one of them also. And because Russ Thomas was really tight with the money, didn't want to give up a lot of big salaries, and consequently, a lot of players would leave, under those circumstances back at that time.
You went on to have a great career with the Lions. I mean, you basically set different records. I remember you also were known as Steady Eddie. Like if you're going out there, you were making those kicks. What was your fondest memory from your first go around with the Lions, and basically before you had the hip injury and everything?
Well, I mean, everything was really positive. I mean, a lot of really good things happened for me, especially my rookie year. I mean, rookie year, getting voted into the Pro Bowl, being the first rookie to be MVP in the Pro Bowl game, that these were, just not heard of things, and especially for a kicker to do that. And, I was very blessed to be on a team that, they were gunslinging. What we were explosive, we were interesting to watch, but we're also very frustrating that we let a lot of games slip by our fingers, and we didn't make the playoffs that rookie year, even though we were very hot. And of the 12 seasons, my first 12 seasons in the league that I played with the Lions, I only had 2 winning seasons. But we had a lot of those 6-10, 7-9. We were close to 500 a lot. And we, always played really hard, very competitive, very exciting football. We just didn't win. We just didn't win a lot. But the 91 season was magical for us, being 12-4 and having the best record the Lions ever had, and being 1 game away from the Super Bowl. That was a special moment for me as a Lion.
Now yourself, at the end of your time with the Lions, you had a hip injury. What had happened at that time with your hip? Was it just
overtraining? Yeah, I was working out before camp. I remember the day I was at the Lions at the Silverdome. I had a weight workout, played a little bit of racquetball, decided, I'm going to go out and get a little bit of kicking in. Thought I'd go kick for a half hour in the Silverdome, grabbed a bag of balls, went out. So I'd been there. I lifted and played racquetball for like between maybe 4 or 5 hours. I was there doing something. And went out and started kicking, and I planted one of these times. I planted, and it was like someone shot me in my hip. And what I ended up doing was I pulled my gluteus minimus and my like a hip, one of the hip muscles, also in a glute. I just blew them out. Is what I did, and it was like I had a watermelon on the side of my hip, like really quickly. It just blew up, and a lot of swelling. I had difficulty walking and all of that kind of stuff. And, thank God there was a lot of people that were kind of around in the Silverdome. They went in and grabbed the trainers, and they came out, and, and so what ended up happening was I went to camp and kicked and got ready for some preseason games, but I could never kind of get back to, you use that term 100%, but you getting back to the point where I could kick during the week. So what ended up happening, I ended up getting a bunch of shots in my hip just to kind of reduce pain and swelling. Hey, and pain and swelling. And then I wouldn't kick during the week. So it was a really, tenuous start to the season where I wouldn't kick all week. I'd kick in a game, and I didn't have a whole lot of feeling in my hip because of the shots that I was taking. So it was kind of a guess. And then it got to a point where they decided to put me on injured reserve, and they signed Rich Carlos to come in. And so he played 4 games, and then it gave me the ability to just rest my hip and rehab and get back. And that wasn't afforded me because I got hurt like, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 days before camp started. So it wasn't like I could take the time off. So it was a decision made at the time. I okayed the decision that they wanted to do at the time, and it ended up not being the best thing to do. So I needed to go on injured reserve. So, but then since then I was fine. Ever since all that kind of stuff, I've been fine. Never had any hip issues or ever that after.
That's great. I'm glad you didn't have any kind of long-term effects after that.
Yeah, no, I never did. I've been very fortunate. I haven't had any surgeries. A lot of the injuries I had were all kind of soft tissue stuff. So I've been very blessed that way.
Now, I know that at the end of your time with the Lions, they had drafted Jason Hanson. Were you starting to see sort of the writing on the wall that your career with the Lions could be over?
Well, it was evident. The story to it, I remembered I was at a Red Wing game the night of the draft, or the day of the draft, I should say. I went to a Red Wing game. Don't ask me who they were playing, but I was a big Red Wing fan. I would go to at least 25 home games a year. I was a very big supporter. Might be the only Canadian that can't skate. So, I mean, but I love a lot of my close friends are hockey players. So anyway, at the time, I was at a game. I remember during the day the draft was on. I remember not paying attention to it because I remember going into it. I was always curious with talking to our scouts and our director of player personnel, Ron Hughes and Kevin Colbert and all, and every draft, hey, you know, what's going on? What's our thought? You know, who you guys like and all this kind of stuff. And they would kind of banter back, you know, with what was going on. But that draft, I always remember, I don't know how it kind of worked out the way it did, but it did. I remembered asking Kevin Colbert, I said, hey, what's the kickers like this year? You know, he went to combine, all this kind of stuff. I hadn't really looked at anybody who's kind of, and I always remember this was verbatim. He said this, he goes, there's not a kicker in the draft out there worth drafting. And I thought, oh, really? That's weird. You know, there's got to be someone who's really good. But he said that to me. And so I'm at the Red Wing game. It's in between one of the periods. I usually kind of catch up with people that I know, you know, just in the concourse and, you know, grab a hot dog and a beer kind of thing, you know. And so I was getting ready to walk up the aisleway, and one of the people I was going to go meet was coming down. And he's looking at me. He's got like this like panicked look, and it's, you know, like he's something he's got to tell me. And he goes, oh my God, Ed, I'm so sorry. And I'm going, what? He goes, I'm so sorry the Lions drafted a kicker. So I thought he's joking with me, right? I'm going, yeah, right. And he goes, you mean you really don't know? And I'm going, no, what? He goes, oh my God, the Lions gave up 2 picks to move up and take Dallas Cowboys pick. And they took a kicker in the 2nd round, this guy named Jason Hanson. I'm going, you're kidding me. And I'm going, no. You mean you don't know? And I'm going, no, I haven't done any, you know, I was, you know, working the off season and all that. And I said, no, I'm just going about my day, not really, my phone didn't ring. No one ever kind of told me about it. And he goes, are you serious? He goes, yeah, they gave up 2 picks to move up to take the Cowboys pick. Of all things, we're talking about the Cowboys, right? So they took their pick, took Jason. So right away, I knew my fate. I'm going, oh my God, I'm out of here. So sure enough, you know, the next day I now know what's going on, and it's big news and people are talking about it. I'm talking to my agent, John Caponegro. I said, hey, you know, we got to figure out what we're going to do, and seeing, you know, what teams out there, you know, and whenever they make the move to cut me during preseason, we got to kind of plan ahead. So we're planning camp, preseason. Hey, when I get cut, when they make one of the cuts down and all this kind of stuff, you know, we need to kind of have our ducks in a row. Let's look at some teams now. You know, we're kind of game planning about, because I knew I wasn't going to be there. I mean, you don't give up 2 picks and a 2nd round pick and he's an iffy, you know, it's not. So always what happens after the draft, they have minicamp. So they bring in all the draftees, they bring in the veterans, we go through physicals and all of this stuff, and we get to meet each other and just get ready for off-season workouts and training camp and all that stuff. So we go through all the physical process, taking all the tests and all the kind of things. And then the next day we have a meeting, team meeting. We break up, go into individual meetings. And so I go to my locker and I thought, well, I'm going to change, go get a workout in or something like that. And at that time, some of the rookies hadn't made it in yet. Some had missed flights and more couldn't quite get in, but everybody was going to be there that day. So, but Jason wasn't there. He was one of the people that was coming later. So I'm changing my clothes, putting my workout stuff on, and one of the runaround guys for Coach Fonts, this like college kid or so, he was like interning at the Lions, says, hey, Coach Fonts wants to see you. I said, oh, okay, let me just get dressed. He goes, no, put your street clothes back on. And I'm like, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm going, what? Street clothes? I said, is he letting me go? You know, these thoughts are going through as I'm dressing, right? I'm going, why would I need to put my street clothes on to go meet with a guy? I can meet with him in my workout stuff, right? And sweats and all that stuff. So anyway, I put my street clothes on. I go up, Coach Font's there, and he goes, "Hey, Eddie, look, um, you know, the writing on the wall. We did what we did with Jason. We really were really impressed with him, and we're going to let you go today." I'm going, "You mean you're not even going to have me go to camp? You're not going to afford me the opportunity to go to camp?" And he goes, "No, no, I don't want you. I don't want you anywhere around him. I don't want you messing with his head." And I'm going, "Well, don't you want to know if he can handle any of that kind of stuff?" I said, "I know I'm not here, Coach. I understand that. And you know me, you've asked me in the past, hey, the kicker's coming in, can you work with him and help him?" And all, and I never had a problem. Hey, if someone's better than me, they're better, But I'm also going to give them the business. I'm going to see what kind of fortitude they have, what kind of gumption they have. Can they handle all the stuff that kind of goes on? Because it's an education that you got to go through as a kicker. You got to be able to handle the scenarios that are all out there, and to be able to keep your job. So I said, "You mean you don't even want me to help him out? You don't want it?" And he goes, "No, I just don't want you to mess with him at all, and I'm going to let you go today." And I thought, man, I said, "You're not now doing me any favors, because now that teams have drafted people, teams have put what they want to do for camp, they've set their teams. So I'm in limbo. I can't really." I said, "You're not helping me out at all." And he goes, "I'm sorry, that this is what I'm doing." So I wasn't too pleased, but I just said, "Okay, fine, you made your choice. I knew my fate, and if my fate's now, I'm going to move on." And so I just left, went down, grabbed all my stuff, all my shoes and all the things that I had in there. And of all the things, just as I was getting ready to pack up, Jason walked in from his flight. They got him in, and I went over and said, "Hey, good luck this year," and all this kind of stuff. Congratulations on being a Detroit Lion. He goes, "Well, what do you mean?" And I go, "They just released me right now." And he goes, "Oh my God, I'm sorry." And I go, "Don't be sorry. Good luck. Work hard." I said, "This is a great city. You'll do well." Not knowing it was going to end up being 22 years in that form, but he had a phenomenal career. Ended up being a great situation for him, but a bad scenario at the time for me. So it was a little difficult trying to figure out how to maneuver and get on the radar again with teams.
Was that solely Wayne Font's decision, or do you think that came from up above?
I don't know. I mean, at that time, what Wayne had my understanding was Wayne had decisions on the team, like players of the team, but the money, it wasn't a money thing. It wasn't like, I was asking, large amounts of money, because it wasn't a lot of it back then, that's for sure. And so it wasn't a money issue. So it couldn't have been that. I don't know what it was. All I was told was that they just didn't want me to be around him and to kind of mess with his head. They wanted him to have an open opportunity to just, work his way into what he needed to do to get ready for the year. And of course, he ended up being an unbelievably mentally strong as well as a physically capable kicker in the NFL.
Now, were the Cowboys one of the teams on your radar when you were looking for what your next step is? Because I know at the time Dallas didn't. They were always taking free agent kickers or guys that weren't really well known, and letting Steve Hoffman work with them to basically upgrade their skills and so forth. But was that one of the teams that was sort of on your radar, you and your agent?
Well, at the time, so when I left, I ended up not really getting picked up until kind of the middle of the year. I played the one game with Kansas City, which was, I understood the scenario because it was
Nick was hurt, right?
Nick got hurt the game before, and the next game they had, if you remember right, they used to have those TNT games. Yeah, on Thursdays they had like Thursday night TNT games, and they were playing Pittsburgh in Kansas City. So because it was a short week, after that game, they were off basically for 10 days, kind of like what Detroit is with the Thanksgiving Day game.
Sure.
They're off for 10 days. So they knew Nick would be ready for 2 weeks down the road, but that short week, they didn't think he'd be ready. So they brought a bunch of kickers in, and myself included. they made the decision to keep me, but they wanted to wait to see if Nick can still kick. So they just held me up in a hotel, right? So I go in Monday, work out for them. They keep me. I'm in a hotel close to Arrowhead Stadium. I would go in at like 7 o'clock at night and kick with the snapper and holder. They would bring them back. I felt bad for them. So they had to come back and snap and hold for me so I could get some timing with them at least in case they made the move. And then the day before the game, they kind of wanted Nick to make the decision. So Nick tried to kick and he couldn't kick. So then they signed me and I went down when they had like a walkthrough practice. I got introduced to the team. Hey, here's our new kicker, right? Nick can't play. Here's Eddie. I knew a couple of guys. Danny Salamua was on the team at that time, and he was with Detroit. He was a great guy. And so I took, like 10 kicks. They were in street clothes, but I was in, workout stuff to kick with these guys, which they weren't too pleased they had to do that also. So I knew what the scenario was. They basically said, hey, it's going to be a 1-game thing. Are you fine? And I'm going, hey, I'm fine. I got to get my, I thought, hey, this is a big rivalry game. It's a TV televised game, where everybody's going to watch. So I thought, hey, I'm taking advantage of this, Kansas City's a good team. They're going to score all this kind of, I'm going, hey, this is going to be great. Well, we end up losing 35-3. I end up kicking a 52-yard field goal in the game. So that's the only thing I did. I thought I would kick a little bit more, which I didn't. So I signed one day, and 2 days later they cut me. So I had like a 3-day contract with them. And then that following week, I ended up getting a call by Sam Weish to come down and try out for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I ended up with the last 7 games with them. So I got 8 games in that year. And then I went to camp with Sam afterwards, and they had drafted Michael Husted, was a rookie that year. So to answer your question on the Dallas Cowboys side of things, I was paying attention. Now here I am, I'm back in the league. I got my foot in the door. I had, an okay year with Tampa prior, but I'm now at camp. So now I'm competing. That's what I want. I want to show I can do it, even the age that I was at. And I was 35 at the time, and I still wanted, to keep playing. And Sam came up to me and I loved Sam. Why, she was a great guy, really a great coach, but he was just so honest and honorable about how he went around things and stuff. Then players really respected his honesty. But he said, hey, look, Ed, do what you can to help Michael get ready for the year. I said, but I need you, because at this point in time, I'm planning on going into the year with 2 kickers, you and Michael. Okay, I'm telling you right now, that's what I'm planning on doing, because Michael's got some rough edges, and I need you to help him smooth them out and get them ready, if you don't mind doing that. And I said, Coach, I'll do whatever you want. Help me out. If I can play and I can, just keep doing what I got to keep doing and stay relevant, then great. And so that's what ended up happening. So I was helping Michael out, and preseason's going through, and then of all the crazy scenario that ended up happening was the last preseason game that we had, we lost like 4 starters got hurt. And now all of a sudden everything got tipsy-turvy with who they were going to keep. So Sam pulls me in and he goes, hey, Ed, I know I told you at the beginning of camp you were going to be here. He said, I had we have no idea that we're going to lose 4 starters. They're going to be back, but I've got to come up with a final cut right now, and I need to fill some spots. So I got to take Michael. Okay. But you tell me who you want me to call, because you've had an unbelievable training camp. He said, you still can kick in this league. I don't care what your age is. You kick off great. You're accurate. You're great. You're a great teammate. All these accolades. He said, but you let me know. And I happened to be following the Cowboys with Lynn Elliott. So the year before, the Cowboys won the Super Bowl. right? So they're a great team. And Lynn was a young kicker. Well, the following year, he had some struggles in preseason. One of the games ended up being, remember, they used to have the America Bowl games in preseason in London. Well, the Cowboys played in that game against the Lions. They played against the Lions that year, and I was watching the game on TV, seeing how Jason's doing, and just watching the game. And I remember, I think both of them, I know Lynn missed like 3 kicks, and I think Jason missed a couple. They both played really poorly, but especially Lynn, because it was a pattern like that preseason. He just was really doing poor, missing a lot of kicks, not doing well. So they still went into the season with him. And the first game of the year, the Cowboys played the Redskins in RFK. Lost the game. Lynn had missed some kicks, didn't do well. So he's now carrying over, not doing well from the preseason, now into the beginning of the year. The next game was a rematch of the Super Bowl against Buffalo, the home opener back at Texas Stadium. And the way the game was going, Lynn had missed a kick. The game was tight. Cowboys were driving down. They were 3 points behind. And it was 4th down, like on the 8-yard line or something like that. And Jimmy decided not to kick the field goal. He knew, because Jimmy said in interviews afterwards, I knew I was going to change kickers. Then I didn't have enough confidence in Lynn to kick the tying kick, let alone having to then go into overtime and kick a game winner. He said, I rolled the dice on trying to go for it on 4th down, and they missed Jay Novacek in the end zone, and they lost the game. So now they're 0-2. Defending champions, never done that, being 0-2. The stats at that time was if you were 0-2 as any team, you would never make the playoffs. That was the stat back then. And so that's when Jimmy said, okay, I'm bringing him in. And so you're right. Steve Hoffman then kind of took over, and they brought in 4 older kickers. I remember Matt Barr was there with me, and I'm trying to think, it was Schubert. I think Schubert was his name. He kicked in San Diego for a few years. And then another guy. And then they had 4 young guys. And so I remember the day, it was one of those Dallas rain wind days. I mean, it had to be 40, 50 mile an hour winds. And we're out at Valley Ranch trying to kick. And it was cold. And so they had the young guys go first. And they brought them in like an hour and a half, maybe before us. And they brought us old farts over later on to go kick. And I remember showing up and I'm seeing them, you know, you can see over the fence, the goalposts and them kicking. And I remember going in, and the equipment guy was there, and a couple of the coaches. All right, guys, you know, what do you want? And the equipment guy goes, and he comes out and he's got sweatpants, you know, short socks, jock, t-shirt, sweat top, you know, gloves, hat, all this kind. He brings like this big old pile. Looks like the old army days, you know, when you go to get the boot camp and they give you all the stuff and you're walking through with all of your stuff. That was kind of, and he brought all this stuff to me. And I'm going, what am I going to do with all this stuff? He goes, well, that's what all of the other guys, the young guys, kind of all wanted. So we just kind of just figured you guys might want the same things. And I'm going, give me the jock, give me the shorts, give me the t-shirt. Okay. I can fight, you know, I could fight through going to be out there for 30 minutes, 45 minutes. I said, I can't kick with all this crap on. I said, you know, there's just no way. And so here there you go. I'm looking through the windows of the practice facility, you know, watching these guys. I go outside, watching them kicking, and they're all bundled up and all everything, and balls are flying all over the place. And they finish and they come off the field, and Coach Johnson and Joe Avezzano and Steve Hoffman and a couple of ball boy guys and stuff like that. They come over and we go inside and they introduce, you know, say, all right, guys, you know, stretching here, you know, it's warmer and all this stuff. We all do. And I knew Matt pretty well compared to some of the other older kickers that they had. And they were all in sweatpants and stuff like that. Not as much as some of the younger guys were. And so we went out and we kicked. And Hoff told me this afterwards. You know, he said, Jimmy's, he was a psychology major at Arkansas. I didn't know if you remember that, right? So he was a psychology major. So he loved the mind game. He loved seeing how people reacted, and he was intrigued with me because I didn't put on all the warm clothes. He was going, what is this guy doing, right? But he saw my demeanor, with just talking with guys, and I introduced myself to the younger guys where none of the other guys did. It was just me, I just would go and introduce myself to people. And so, but he was intrigued that I didn't have a lot of clothes on. I just, bit the bullet for the amount of time that I'm out there. Hey, let's get it done. I'm here, to do a job. I'm here to show I can kick, and let's go do it. We're not going to fart around. I'm not going to stand out there for 2 hours. That might be a different scenario, but I figured for 30, 40 minutes, I could handle a little bit of rain, a little bit of wind, and, cold. And it was chilly. So I'm out there and I'm kicking off, and we're trying to kick into the wind, which was just insane why they had us do that. I mean, we're kicking, not even 30-yard field goals, and we had a hard time in going over the crossbar. I mean, that's the kind of wind we had. Now, kicking with the wind, we're kicking 80-yard field goals. I mean, it was crazy. So we go through everything. We come off, we shower. The younger guys were just finishing eating. They had like sandwiches or something like that for us, but they had finished because we were out on the field. And so I started eating lunch and stuff. And Hoff, I should say, not Joe. Hoff came over and says, hey, Coach Johnson wants to see you. So I go in. He said, hey, Eddie, I'm keeping you. But I haven't made a decision because I'm keeping one of the younger guys too. So I said, okay, what do you need me to do? He goes, just stay right here. So he said, I'm going to go say my goodbyes to everybody else. I've made my decision. So they kept me. And of all things, there was another guy. We had a rookie along with Michael Husted at Tampa. Bennett was his last name. I can't think of his first name, but they kept him. He ended up being the other guy. And they said, okay, we're going to send you to the hotel so you can relax a little bit. And we're going to talk to your agents, and we're going to make a decision. And, 6 hours later, it was shortly just a little bit after dinner or something like that, I got a call from my agent saying, hey, they've made the determination they're going to go with you. So, it was just a magical year. Of all the things, that was when Emmitt was sitting out. He was holding out for contract. And so they ended up signing Emmitt and me the same day. So, and then I just hung on to their coattails because they dragged me along on an unbelievable ride. It was just an amazing team. They were so in sync. They were so gifted with the staff they had, the players they had. And it was just a magical experience to win that Super Bowl with those guys.
That's an interesting story that you and Emmitt, basically you're inking a deal to join the Cowboys. And I remember the Emmitt holdout. I mean, and the fans were frustrated. Everybody was annoyed. I remember Charles Haley threw quite a temper tantrum after that Buffalo game.
He did.
He put a hole in the wall.
He put a hole in the wall. He did. It's still there. It was still there when I was there. I remember seeing the thing and I go, oh, that's got to be, because that was well documented, his frustration and his outburst after practice. And he wasn't too pleased with Jerry Jones not signing Emmitt at that time.
How did the mood change? I mean, you came in, so I mean, there's obviously you helped to stabilize the kicking game, and they were going to move forward, and then obviously Emmitt's coming in. So how did that uplift the team?
Well, being sarcastic, I didn't uplift them. Emmitt uplifted them coming in. Like I said, all I did was I just tried to stay out of their way and just do my job. I really did, but automatically, I mean, first of all, I was older than Steve Hoffman, who was my coach. I was older than anybody on the team at that time, because they were a young team at that time. And so for me, it was, like I did when I went to the other teams. It's just, just my whole emphasis at that time is just do my job. I'm not here to make friends. I'm not here to do anything else but what they've signed me to a contract to do, and just stay focused on that. And that's what I did. I just worked hard. Jimmy was just no bones about it. It was work hard at practice, get the job done, know your assignment, get things done quickly. We won't be on the field forever. But if you fart around and don't know your assignments, you're going to be replaced. We'll bring someone else in who can do all this stuff, but we're not going to be out here forever. So know what you're doing, know what we ask you, get into the playbook, know the game plan, just know your job. So he spoke my language. And so my job was very easy. Just go out there, get my timing down with Dale Hallistray, the snapper, and Jay Novacek, and make field goals for them so they don't need to worry about it. And hopefully they won't need me because they were such a great team. Of all things, it ended up they needed me the last game of the year with the last game against the Giants in Giant Stadium when Emmitt separated his shoulder. He still ran for 70 yards with a separated shoulder, but I had to make a kick in overtime to win the game, which made us win the division. That's how close the division was at that time. If we had lost the game, we would have had to have come back to play the Giants in the wild card game. That's how crazy it was. So it gave us 2 weeks to get ready, and it gave 2 weeks for Emmitt to get his shoulder right. And Jimmy has said it in numerous interviews that if Eddie Murray hadn't made that kick, we would not have won the Super Bowl. And that's where I look at, I did my job. I just stay focused in on what I needed to do. And when they needed me, I made the kick, got Emmitt healthy, ready to go to make for the playoff run. And that's what we did. We just stormed through the playoffs.
The team was loaded at the time, but like you mentioned, I mean, because they got off to that rough start, and then the Giants hung in there that season.
Sure did. They had a good team.
Could you see how the game was building? Because I remember Dallas started off really well, then Emmitt got hurt. But could you kind of tell, okay, I better have my A game today because, the boys need this game?
Well, I mean, one of the things that I learned really quickly through Coach Johnson, and just, at that time, it was my 14th year in the league, was teams that I was on before, and of course, most of them were with Detroit at that time, was the fact that, we weren't really good. So you couldn't afford to just, for lack of better words, well, this is a game where, we're not going to win. They were expected to win every game. I didn't have the opportunity to take a game off or to take a kickoff or anything like that. Every down, everything that happened during that season was important to win. And so it kept me on my toes. So I didn't change my attitude. I went in very focused, very driven, wanting to show that I was still relevant, which I did. And they afforded me an opportunity to really shine because I ended up having my best year as a pro in 14 games with the Cowboys, scored the most points, had a phenomenal percentage year. In the playoffs, I didn't miss a kick. I think I ended up being 12 for 12 through the playoffs and through the Super Bowl, made 3 for 3 in the Super Bowl, ended up having an unbelievable playoff run in Super Bowl. But it kept me focused. I just didn't take a kick off. I really didn't. And I benefited from how the expectations that Coach Johnson had for the players there get up to speed really quick. Okay, this is what it is. It's not rocket science. Just do your job is really kind of the bottom line. And for me, my job was fairly simple. Just make kicks for them. Just make kicks.
Do you have a funny Jimmy Johnson story that you can share?
Oh, he was a jokester. He had a great sense of humor. He always would take an opportunity to have a laugh and stuff, and pick on people if he needed to be. I know that he was. They were always a big thing on my aspect of things, which I didn't know at the time, but was. Coach Johnson and Troy Aikman used to have side bets during field goal in practice. So when I came on, I'm the old guy now, right? So I'm the old guy. So it was always, all right, I got $5 on the old guy. And someone would say, oh, okay, I think he's going to miss, And so there was that kind of a banter kind of back and forth and stuff. And so it was just an unbelievable environment of respect and desire that he created, and work ethic. I mean, it was just amazing how they worked. That they worked so hard at practice. They were unbelievable. Weren't out there a long time, but man, were they proficient when they practice.
You brought it up earlier about Jimmy being the psychology major and basically able to read different scenarios and situations. He felt the team was too tight going into that NFC Championship game, and he called that radio station and he made that bold prediction.
Yeah.
What was the mood of the team going into that game? Like, we have to back Coach Johnson. Like, did that kind of, were you guys tight going into that week that Jimmy felt he had to do that, kind of looking back? Or?
Well, I mean, hindsight's always 20/20, right? I mean, so, Jimmy doesn't do anything without calculating why he's doing it. There's no off the cuff or a whim comment. He's thought it out somewhere along the way, and he felt he needed to take a little pressure off us by making those comments and then putting all of the onus on himself and just taking a little bit off of us, so we can go in a little bit more focused rather than a little bit more under pressure of the expectation of winning that game, that NFC Championship game against the 49ers.
Now, near the end of that season, there was sort of had a little bit of the rumblings about Jimmy maybe looking at Jacksonville or some of the different things, of him becoming unsettled. Did you see any rift beginning between Jerry and Jimmy yourself? I mean, I realize, what's the word I'm looking for? I mean, you got a job to do or this, that, the other, but did you see any kind of weird interactions in the locker room or anything giving you a moment of pause of going, is this going to end up being something, between these two down the road?
Well, I know for myself, it wasn't like a visible thing. It wasn't like it was something really tangible, but because there was so much history with those guys prior to it, there was always an underlying, I don't know whether it was animosity on Jerry's part that he wasn't the coach, because that's what he wanted to be, was a coach. It wasn't enough for him to just be the owner. And that is still today. I mean, he's the owner and general manager of the Cowboys. Not all owners are that. They have a general manager, right? The Cowboys are really the only team that I know that the owner is the general manager too. So there was always a little bit of friction there between them. And I think a lot of it all just stemmed back from their college years. I mean, I think they maybe had a slight competition with each other. They both spurred off in totally different opportunities for themselves. Jerry got into the oil business. Jimmy got into coaching the Miami Hurricanes and becoming successful in doing what he did in coaching. And then, so when they married back up, I still think there were some things, some residual things, and just my observation of it. But to answer your question, there wasn't anything tangible and anything like that. It wasn't like, you'd hear them yelling and screaming at each other, which I'm sure they maybe had times like that. But there was nothing that I ever heard anybody saying, oh, God, you should have heard, Jimmy and Jerry yelling at each other. I never heard any stories like that. But there was always just some underlying friction, for lack of better words, that was going on there, and it ended up kind of coming to a head at the owners' meeting, which was where everything all started from. They decided to part ways.
I was just curious if yourself or maybe the other players had picked up on anything, because I had read a book about the Chicago Bear game and how that Jerry came in the locker room with the Saudi prince, and Jimmy was just really he was seething mad. He wanted some private time with, the players and, talk about some different things. And I know the Cowboys had a big lead in that game. but then they kind of let it slip away. And I think he wanted to get some points across, and he wanted that kind of coach player moment. And then Jerry, Jerry came in and so forth. And I remember reading that about that just set him off. And I was just kind of wondering if there was any kind of confrontation, or if there was other moments that you could recollect, or you remember seeing anything between them. That's all.
Nothing like that. I'm aware of that story. I wasn't on the team at that time when that happened. And I think this is where that, that over the line scenario was always there. Jerry was always kind of pushing Jimmy. I think Jimmy had boundaries. He said, "Hey, Jerry, if we're going to work together, here's what I need from you. And here, you can't cross these lines." Jerry was always pushing those lines. And so things became blurred a little bit sometimes. And so Jerry, that was a prime example where he really went over the line, but Jerry wanted to, for lack of what, kind of insert himself as a coach at that time and bring in the prince. But he was also the owner. So Jimmy looked at him as the owner being in a position where he shouldn't be. He drew some kind of boundaries for Jerry, and Jerry crossed those boundaries by that. And that was my understanding of kind of what that whole scenario was. And I think it just got to a point where it wasn't becoming a good working relationship with the two of them, and they decided to part ways. And as now, I mean, I know recently, I'm sure you heard where Jerry said he made a mistake getting rid of Jimmy, and being in that situation.
Let's look back at a happier moment, the Super Bowl. So basically, Dallas is going into that Super Bowl. What was your mood going in? Because I mean, obviously, like you said, you had some rough seasons with the Lions, and this is giving yourself a real taste of, geez, I'm gonna be able to opportunity to kick in the Super Bowl. How are you feeling going into that week?
I know going into the week. So as we know now, when both teams make the Super Bowl, they win their championship games. 2 weeks later, they play the Super Bowl. The '93 season, they played the Super Bowl the following week. So there wasn't 2 weeks in between. So we beat San Francisco in Dallas on Sunday, and Monday we're in Atlanta in the evening. We're flying in the afternoon, and we're flying and using Atlanta Falcons practice facility that week, getting ready for the Super Bowl. So not being on a Super Bowl team and going through the Super Bowl experience and preparation before. So for me, it was like a long road trip. It's really what it was. I mean, so we win the game, we meet the next day. We were told, we were prepped up to, hey guys, we go all the way to the championship games. If we win, now this itinerary gets put into place. So we were aware of everything prior to it. It was just that Monday we executed that itinerary to go into place. So we knew what we were supposed to do. It wasn't like it was, okay, now what are we going to do? Or where are we going to, all that kind of stuff. So all that was prepped by the Cowboys prior to it. So we had sheets where he knew things, and we knew right after the game, they said, okay, flip into Super Bowl itinerary. Here's where we're meeting. Here's how we're doing things. Here's when the bus is leaving for the airport. We're flying to Atlanta, and then we go into all that. So for me, it was, okay, I got to pack a few more clothes. But it's now just it's a road trip. So going to Atlanta, hotel, we were given instructions about, family members and Super Bowl tickets, and when we get our Super Bowl tickets, and what happens from there, and rooms for family, everything all had to be done by Thursday. I remember Thursday was the magic day. So they said after Thursday, you are not to deal with any family, flights, hotels, anything. You're to just, now there's curfew. So Friday, there was the first day of curfew. Saturday, of course, the day before the game, we went to a different hotel than the team hotel that was used for everybody else. And then the game. So, but for me, what was different was it was actually the game itself. So going to the game, I always like to be on the, the earliest bus to get there as early as I can, because I always used to like to walk around the stadium, whether it was outdoors or indoors, and just kind of get some of the nerves and be out of the locker room or be out of the hotel. I never like to kind of like sit around and just twiddle my thumbs waiting for, the team bus to go to the stadium. I like to get really early there. So I remember going, getting my stuff on, just going out to walk around in the stadium. And then it became different. So, most games you go, and the NFL rule is they open up the doors 2 hours before the game. So you can go out there and there's attendance and people who are working in the stadium walking around, but there's not a whole lot of people in the stands. Well, the Super Bowl, the things open early. I mean, it's an event, right? I mean, it's a party. So I remember going there, and there had to be, I don't know, maybe half full. Sidelines were packed with people, celebrities, dignitaries for both teams. It was packed. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm playing in the Super Bowl. And it hit me. I mean, it really, and I remember getting a wave of nerves and feeling very uneasy. And this is different, and not handling it. I remember not having the greatest of warm-ups. But the thing that helped me was in that game, Buffalo kicked off to us, the opening kickoff, and Kevin Williams, our returner, I think he returned it to like their 40-yard line, had a huge return and just really catapulted us. And we went like 3 downs, didn't get a first down, and I went out and kicked a field goal. So like within the first 2 minutes of the game, I'm out kicking a field goal, which ended up being my longest kick of the game. It was like 44 yards or something like that, if I recall right. Making the kick, making it really good. And now it just became another game. So for me, I got into the game really quickly. Unfortunately, the team didn't, because we were down, I think, 13-6, if I believe, at halftime. And then, of course, Buffalo never scored again. We went on to win 30-13. And so, but I got into the game really quickly. And so that really helped me calm myself down and just realize that, hey, this is now just another game. And that's really how it helped me just really stay in the game. So,
but besides the Giants game where you had that great kick, was there anything else that really stood out for you personally during that season, or maybe a kick you made or a particular game that that really stands out?
I remembered having a really good game against Minnesota. In Minnesota, I had 2 50-plus 50-yard field goals in that game, which for me, I'd never had it in my career. And again, to kind of validate myself, 35, 14 years in the league, validate the Cowboys made a good move. It was a good for me, good for them kind of a scenario. That was very gratifying to me. I know the Cowboys made a big deal of it in meetings afterwards. I got player of the game kind of things and all that kind of stuff. So that felt really nice to be recognized as the season was going along, that I was, really solidifying the kicking situation for them, that they didn't need to worry too much. So.
You played with a few other franchises also, like you mentioned Tampa Bay, and then there was a couple other times you were called on to fill in, when a kicker was injured and so forth, even later on in your career.
Yeah.
How was playing for the Cowboys different than your other stops?
Well, they were all great stops. Number one, because they gave me an opportunity to try out for the team, and they felt I was worthy enough to sign. So, my last year I was 44 years old. So I always believed in myself, but there were a lot of people along the way who didn't. And the Lions being one of them. I think the main reason why they got rid of me was because, well, Eddie's 30, he's 35. We got to get rid of him. And they just made a blanket decision to do what they did. It ended up being a great decision for them. It really did. So but at the time, having to figure what I was going to do for myself. So to continue, I mean, I played 9 more years after I left Detroit. So that was very gratifying to just do that and to have the career and come out of a small town in Canada like I did, and not really growing up playing football. Wasn't like I wanted to be a kicker in the NFL. And it ended up working out great, going to college, getting a degree, a lot of really interesting scenarios for myself that I validated, really unique situations for myself and taking advantages of them and that. So, but again, small town Canadian kid coming out and playing like I did in the NFL for 19 years. I was extremely blessed, but very fortunate to play with every team that I played with.
Looking back, what was your favorite NFL stadium to kick in and least favorite stadium to kick in?
Oh, well, the Silverdome was kind of hard to not like there just because of the amount of years that I played there. Great fans, great environment. When that place was hopping, it was hopping. I mean, it was a great place to play in front of. But back in my era, I mean, there were a lot of bad stadiums, unfortunately. There were a lot of stadiums that were, the old baseball stadiums. So you played at Cleveland, you had baseball, Raiders, baseball, Pittsburgh, baseball. I played at old Milwaukee County Stadium against the Packers. I played at the old Met when the Minnesota Vikings. Those were unique, both the Met and Milwaukee County Stadium. We used to be on the same sideline with the other team back then. So 150-yard line would be the Vikings, and on the other 50 on the same side would be us. So that was unique back then. So you look at stadiums now and field, you don't need to worry about anything. I mean, the stadiums, the turf is unbelievable now. So you didn't have to worry about the winds and the mud and the infield and all of this stuff. Shea Stadium was notorious for being a bad place to play. Oh man, there was quite a few unbelievable places. Chicago wasn't the greatest either. I mean, just because, you could go there in preseason and there'd be wind, and you could go there in November, December, and you got wind and you got cold. I mean, so that wasn't the greatest place to kick either.
I was just interested what your answer would be, because I remember some of those different stadiums and the wind conditions. And like you said, some of them were dual purpose, where they were using them for baseball, they were using them for football, and not only, what else was going on. And some of them, like what they looked like on Sunday, and, the players having to play in those conditions. Yeah.
Well, even the 1 year after the Dallas Cowboys, so I got signed by the Philadelphia Eagles under the new salary cap era that we're in. So I was their very first free agent signing for the Eagles was me. But playing at the old Vet back then, that stadium, I don't know how they got away. I mean, the infield and the pitcher's mound was, it was like 2 inches above the turf, the pitcher's mound that they plugged into the field. And I'm going, and this is legal? It was like a step in the middle of the field. There was one, I forget the guy, there was a wide out for the Bears.
Wendell Davis.
Was it Wendell Davis?
Yes, I remember both, that was.
He blew both patella tendons by tripping over the pitcher's mound at the Vet Stadium. Not one, but both of his patella tendons. Those are crazy things. And they think that's okay. I was always astonished at. I'm going to the ground guy and going, can you lower this a little bit more? Can you take some dirt out or whatever you're doing with this plug? He goes, nope, that's what we're doing. That's how they did it. They just didn't even think anything about it.
I got a scenario for you, Eddie. So I'm gonna have you play Coach Murray. You had an opportunity to watch Billy Sims in his prime.
Sure.
You also got to see Barry Sanders near the end of your career.
Yeah.
And then obviously you were in Dallas with Emmitt Smith.
Sure.
So say it's beginning of the fourth quarter, the game is tied at 17, and you need to get a touchdown. It's third and goal from about the 4-yard line. Which running back are you choosing?
Well, first of all, it's an easy question because I'm going to give it to each one, all of them.
Okay.
Okay, because they were all unbelievable runners. But as far as running backs, running backs have more responsibility than just carrying a ball. They have to catch the ball and they got to be able to block. And the best of those three was Emmitt Smith. Emmitt Smith was an unbelievable blocker. I mean, he would just flat out put his head right in your chest and block you. Barry, not so much. Okay, Barry was a runner, wasn't also the greatest catcher. Remember, they were always notorious talking about the size of his hands. He had small hands. Billy was a good catcher of the ball, wasn't, again, a big fan of blocking. Back then, he wanted to run. But as far as a complete back, I mean, Emmitt didn't hesitate when he had a blocking assignment to do his job. He was unbelievable. He was really, but if I'm going to hand the ball off, I don't care who I'm handing it off. If Billy or Barry or Emmitt are back there, I have every confidence they're gonna do their job and get those 3 or 4 yards for the touchdown.
I was curious what your answer would be, and then I also remember Billy jumping over the piles. That used to
Did a lot of that.
He
Did a
used
lot
to
of karate
jump over the
kicking.
piles.
He did a lot of karate kicking with the Houston linebacker. That remembered that happening right in front of me. Going, I can't believe I just saw him karate kick this guy.
We touched a little bit about Coach Hoff earlier, and I know Dallas was in a little bit of a different situation where the Cowboys had their own specific kicking coach, and then obviously you had a special teams coach and Coach Avizano. And I believe at the time Miami might have been the only other team that had a kicking coach. I think they had, was it Coach Blevins? Because a lot of times you just—
I believe it was. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm a big proponent, especially in the NFL ranks, for having kicking coaches. I mean, the special teams coach is basically not wanting to be there. It's in light of saying that. Of course, they want to be on the staff, but they want to be another coach. They want to be another position coach because that's what they grew up doing. They played football, they played in high school and college, and they were whatever positions that they were, like Jimmy was an offensive lineman and all that kind of stuff, right? And Jerry were, so they weren't a special teams person. They were a player, you know what I'm saying? So with the scenario with that, the special teams coach is always a foray, a step into becoming a position coach in the NFL and then moving on. There are some people who stayed there and have done very well, the Frank Ganses of the world and all of, guys who have, that's what they specialized in. But in essence, they would like to be a coach somewhere else. So with that being said, I'm having a coach tell me how to kick a ball, and this guy has never kicked a ball in his life. So he's coaching me how to do that. I never understood that. So when I went to the Cowboys, I now had an ally. We're talking this pig Latin together now with each other, Hoff and I. We understand the scenarios that we have to think about: weather, wind, wet, cold, grass, turf, indoor, outdoor. All those scenarios are in our equation. It's not just snap, hold, kick. There are other aspects of what we have to try to deal with as a kicker. So having someone understand those and help me evaluate those things as a coach was very beneficial. And they're too hasty sometimes to make changes in kickers because they just look at, hey, he's missed 3 kicks in a row. Well, why did he do that? You have to analyze that, as well as being the kicker, you have to understand that and convey that to your coaching staff. Sometimes it's just not as simple as he just missed it. It could be some just issues where there's an operational issue that's going on. Sometimes it could be, hey, the guy's going through, hard times with his wife. He's carrying some issues and some baggage that he shouldn't. You have to deal with your life also, but he's having some issues. So help him through these things. Maybe he's got a little bit of a nagging injury and he doesn't want to tell you because he thinks you're going to replace him. Rather than maybe getting him extra treatment time to get him back close to hell. Again, I'm throwing these things out, but these are all things I know in my life that all went on, and having to deal with them. But to answer your question, having Coach Hoff there wasn't, and he actually changed my kickoff. My kickoff changed because of him. So it's called the scissor kickoff, where you kick and you're like a hurdler. You know, you kick the ball with your right foot, and then you land on your right foot. So you're like running. I used to kick off, and then land back on my left foot, my plant leg. So I changed it. And then it adds a little bit more power, a little more speed that you can put into your thing. And so he taught me this new kickoff, which I ended up taking from 93 all the way on to 2000 when I played for the Redskins. And it helped me. So here I am, I'm 35 years old, and I've learned something new. Having a coach, a special teams coach, would never afford me that type of opportunity. I had someone who spoke my language and said, hey, try something, try this. And so, yeah, I got a lot of respect for Steve, a lot of respect. And he was used wisely. Steve knew his place. He knew, hey, I could add more value by helping, break down film. And he dove into helping Jimmy back when he was an assistant at University of Miami with him, is where he first got into his relationship with Coach Johnson. And Coach Johnson realized just how big of an asset that he was. He really was. And then dealing with the younger guys, developing those guys for the organization was a key thing.